So if you follow us on Instagram, you've probably seen that we've been making a few of the rifle slings. I've got two different styles that I make when it comes to rifle slings, and one is just a traditional shaped one. We've got quite a bit of room here to put some floral tooling or basket stamping, and then I also have one that I kind of designed off a modification of one that I had seen that we're just calling a thumb hole gunsling. And the purpose of this is like kind of when you're walking and you can carry your rifle, you can hold, you know, you can just have a place to put your thumb, I guess. But I had a customer that ordered one time, and I thought it was a cool idea, so I went ahead and made me a pattern of a version of that. And so we're going to go ahead in this video. I'm going to make one of each of these. As you can see at the beginning of the video, we're cutting those out. We cut those out of 5/6 ounce Herman oak leather. You can definitely do that out of 9/10 if you'd like a little heavier gunsling. Just over the years, I've found that they work a little bit better if they're lighter, if they're not too heavy. So both of these were made out of this same 5/6 ounce material, and I just lined them with this one here is lined with just a veg tan, and this one here is lined with just an oil tan. I find that when you line them with an oil tan, they tend to have a softer feel. I think they'll break in a little bit better, maybe sit in a gun case better, and they're just a little bit more comfortable. These break in as well. I used to make them way too heavy. I would do 9/10 and 3/4, just like our belts. And I just feel that the gunslings themselves were a little bit too heavy. So over the last couple of years, I've been lightening them up a bunch and making them a little bit lighter. But you could certainly use whatever size you want as far as leather goes. Now we have created a pattern pack for these. This is not the final version of it. We've been doing a little bit of work on it, but it is available now on the website, the completed version. But this is the original copy that I was doing some editing on. And if you would like to get that, it comes with the patterns for both the thumb hole and the traditional shaped, and it comes with 8 different tooling patterns, 4 for each gunsling. Now you can certainly take the patterns for the thumb hole sling and then put them on the traditional shaped one if you'd like. You just may have to do a little bit of modifications because this one narrows down quite a bit earlier than this one does. But that pattern will have 8 different tooling patterns in there, and it's got the cut patterns for both of these. So in this video, I'm gonna go ahead and make one of each, one thumb hole, one traditional shaped, and I'm gonna do one floral and one basket stamped. I'll show you that in the video. Like I said, it's not a whole lot to them, but you'll get to see kind of how I put them together and go from there. If you wanna go ahead and get that pattern pack, there is a link down in the description. Otherwise, let's get started in the video. I'll show you how to make these. Okay, so the first thing I did was I took my gunslings and I just put some blue tape where the tooling's gonna be. That's just to keep it from stretching like we do in all our other videos on different projects. You could certainly use box tape if you don't want to use blue painter's tape. The box tape actually keeps them from stretching a little bit better, but it's really hard to get off of the back of this because we don't leave that tape in there. You could also do like we do in our belts, and you could cut out a narrower piece of poster board and glue that in. That'll give your gunsling a little bit more body. But again, I think gunslings need to be somewhat soft, and they don't need to be super stiff, in my opinion. So that's why I've been lighting them up, and I'd rather not see the poster board in there. But then we've got our pattern pack here, and as you can see, here's some of the tooling patterns. This is my edit piece, the edit copy that I was using. I just keep it on my bench. And so there are some marks in here. We made some adjustments to the patterns, but it's basically the same patterns. I was just changing the size of the tooling. And then I'm gonna take a piece of tracing paper. I just use regular old tracing paper. You could use transfer film or anything like that if you'd like. And we're just gonna trace off all of the tooling pattern that I've decided to use. I'm gonna go ahead and use a scroll pattern. We're gonna go ahead and trace that onto the tracing paper so that we can get that transferred over to the gunsling. I usually draw directly on the leather, but here I'm gonna kind of show you how I would take one of these tooling patterns and go ahead and transfer it, just for those that may have trouble figuring out how do you get this onto the leather. So we're just gonna take this pattern, and I like to trace the outer border. That'll help me to line this up onto the actual leather piece, so we're going to ensure that it's where it needs to be. Alright, so one tip whenever you're tracing these off on tracing paper or tracing film, before you move it, like hold it down, before you move it, just kind of pick that up so that you can see anywhere you might have missed. Because if you just pick it up and then you find a spot you missed, you're gonna have to line everything back up. And so one little trick, just keep it held down and just kind of lift it up, and you can see anywhere you might have missed. I missed that spot right there. A little easier to figure out. But there's our pattern. So now we've got it on tracing paper, and now we'll go ahead and trace that on dry leather. If you're using tracing paper, you're gonna want to do this on dry leather because this stuff will absorb water and tear really easily. So you're gonna want to transfer it just straight onto dry leather. If you're using tracing film, you can definitely use a stylus, mist your leather down, and get it a little damp, and then you can come over all this with a stylus. But we're gonna go ahead and flip it, since it doesn't matter which direction this pattern really is on the sling. We're gonna go ahead and just flip it, trace the back side. It'll transfer the lead from the face of the tracing paper to the leather, and then we'll freshen it up with a 8B pencil so we can see it good, and then we're ready to tool it. Now, my pattern differs just a hair from the actual pattern in the pattern pack. So as you can see, I'm just a little bit wider on this one, on my actual cut pattern, but it's not going to affect you at all, and it's not going to hurt this either, being a little bit narrower. So we'll get all this traced off. Now I am tracing the back side of the tracing film. So the lead side that we originally traced is actually against the leather. And so I'm just retracing it now using my pencil as a stylus. You could do this with a stylus. You don't have to use a pencil. You just need to press well so that lead will transfer. And so hopefully, I don't know if you can really see that in the video, but it's transferring that lead so that I can see. So we'll get all this traced. Alright, so I don't know if you can see that in the video. It probably looks really light on the video, but you can see this really well in the shop. But now I'm going to go ahead and go over it with an 8B pencil just so that I can make sure everything's the way I want it. Make sure I can see it well when I'm carving it. And so as you can see, this is why I draw directly on the leather. If you can get to that point where you're confident in your artwork, where you're drawing your own patterns and stuff, it really saves you a lot of time, because I've traced this same pattern now. This is the third tracing of it, because I had to trace it on the tracing paper, then trace it on leather, and now I'm going over it again. And I just don't prefer to work that way because it's just too time consuming. Now if you were to make you a tap off or a craft aid or something, that is probably a lot better, because you can transfer the pattern very quickly onto wet leather. But if you're doing tracing film and that sort of thing, which we all have to sometimes, I mean that's just part of it, but it takes so much more time than if you just drew it directly on there and tooled the original copy. So if you've taken our drawing course, you've heard me mention that before. I don't want to tool the third or fourth copy of something. I want to tool the original. But we got to do what we got to do sometimes to get the project where we want it. So this is the best way that I've found. All right, so now we're going to get this carved, and I've already got it messed down with some water, and so we're just going to carve this up and go ahead and tool it. I'm not going to show all of the tooling. Like I said, in every other video, we've got other videos that are devoted onto the tooling, but we'll go ahead and show some of that here. right, so for this traditional shaped one, we're going to go ahead and just do a basket stamp on here. And so I'll show you kind of how I do that a little bit. Just simple basket stamp. That actually sells really well. We do a lot of them that are just straight basket stamp. You can two-tone them or dark oil them or just dye them black or brown or something like that, and they do really well. But we'll go ahead and get this one basket stamped. All right, so now that they're both tooled, we'll go ahead and I'm going to do a two-tone dye job on both of these, and we're just using dark brown 5 beans dye, and we're using the Pro Oil dye, and we're just going to go ahead and two-tone both of these and get those ready to be oiled and antiqued so we can start putting those together. Like on all our projects, I'm just using straight olive oil here. You don't need to use extra virgin olive oil or anything like that, you can just use any kind of olive oil you can find. We buy it in a big bucket. And then here we're going to go ahead and use tan coat to seal this. Once it's had time for the oil to kind of sit and get even, we'll go ahead and put tan coat on here as our resist, and then we'll get this antiqued. We do have a video available on our antiquing process if you'd like to go back and watch that. Alright, so our antiquing has been done. These are completely finished pieces of leather here, and so we're going to go ahead and pull that blue tape off. Just be real careful. Always remember, pull the blue tape, not the leather, off the tape. It'll keep from wrinkling your leather projects, and that tape comes off a lot easier. And then I've got just a side of old tan chap leather here. You can use anything you want. Like I said, the chap leather gives them a little bit better feel in my opinion, and so we'll just go ahead and trace this out and go ahead and cut these out, and that'll be our liner for these gunslings. And just like building a belt, we'll go ahead and lay our liners down and our gunsling bodies down, and we'll go ahead and put glue on here. Just using contact cement here so we get a good bond between the liner and the bodies of these. And I am going to do 2 coats, and that way it sticks really well, but you can decide how many coats you need depending on what leather you decide to use. Now that we've got our liners glued to our body pieces, I like to take a smooth faced hammer there and just kind of tap everything down, make sure we get a good bond, and then we'll go ahead and groove this. I'm going to use just a little groover to make our stitch line groove, and then we'll go ahead and sew these on our Cobra Class 4 and get these ready to finish up and assemble. Now I'm just taking my razor blade knife there, just an X-Acto blade with an injector blade in it. We're just going to go ahead and trim this excess feather off of here. A lot of people ask why I have such a big feather on most of the things that I build, but it sews up a lot easier, and it's a lot easier to get a nice crisp edge if you leave the liners a little bit wide, a little oversized. It'll make your life a lot easier when you're putting these projects together. But we'll get these trimmed up and sanded and edged, and we'll be ready to slick our edges. Now I'm using a number 3 Ron's edger here. Any edger will work. Remember, we did do a video here recently on a short tip video on deciding what size edger you need to use for the project you're working on. Here, like I said, we've got a piece of 4 6-ounce chap leather and a piece of 5 6-ounce for the body. And so a number 3 is going to work pretty well on this to get us a nice rounded edge that doesn't have a flat squared off look to it. Now before I slick the edges, we've got to make the hole on the thumb hole sling. And so we're going to go ahead and get our pattern back out, and we're going to go ahead and mark where that hole goes. You can mark it when you cut them out, but I find that it's easier just to do it once it's sewn up and everything. But we'll mark that hole, we'll cut it out, and then we'll sew it. And that way that's done, and we can slick the inside of that hole when we slick the entire sling. Now you'll notice here on our chopping block I'm using a half round punch, and that's just to get the top and the bottom of this elongated or oblong hole even and nice looking. You can certainly just cut this out with a chisel, a little leather chisel, or you can do it with a blade completely, or you can have a die made for that hole if you'd like a maul die like that to cut that thing out at one time. And if I get to make it a lot of these, that's probably what I'll do. And now I'll just take my blade, nice sharp blade, and we'll go ahead and just trim in between the 2 half-round punches there, and that way we can make a nice hole that we can stitch around, and we'll go ahead and stitch around that on the machine, and then we'll be able to sand and edge and slick the inside of that hole and make it nice and professional looking. So we've got our thumb hole done there, and now we're ready to slick the edges. I have been trying to work in a little bit more of the Martin's mix. We've talked about it on the Monday briefing, and it worked out really well on these gunslings for really laying down and slicking the chap leather in particular on the backside. But I'm really getting the hang of this stuff, and I kind of like it, so I'm really trying to work it in more and more into my my normal process there for edge slicking. But now we'll get all these edges slicked, and we'll be ready to go. So now that we've got the edges slicked on both of our gunslings, we're going to go ahead and let those edges dry real good before we put dye on them. So while we're waiting on that, we need to make one of these little leather loops like this. I like to put these on there so that they can come down here on the bottom and just kind of keep this nice and snug together. Up here you don't have quite the distance, so we don't need one there, but on the bottom there can be quite a bit of distance depending on how you have this adjusted for the length that the customer or you want on the rifle sling when you're carrying the rifle. So I like to put one of these leather keepers. All they do, it just slides up and down here, but it'll come down and just kind of hold the slack out of the strap down here where it folds. So we got quite a bit of distance there. And so these things are real easy to make. What I do for these leather loops is I go ahead and just cut a piece of 5/8 inch strip, just a piece of I think this is 5/6 ounce leather, just veg tan leather, and that works best for these because you want them to be kind of sturdy, so you wouldn't want to use like chap leather or something. But you can go ahead and just cut you a strip. What I do is I cut a long strip, however long, 3-4 foot, whatever, and then I'll edge it, and then I'll get the whole thing wet, and then just take my slicking rag, and just after this is wet, you can dunk it in the water or whatever, then I'll just grab it and just run my hand down that whole strip like that, and that'll slick the edges all the way down, and you'll have one whole piece, and you can hang it up and let it dry. Once it dries, you can mist it down if you want, and you can run a crease along the edge. I just think it looks kind of professional when it's on there. You've got a very light little line that's just burnished in there, and I use a creasing tool that looks like this. This is an old Osborne Creaser. Barry King sells some creasers as well, but it's just kind of a really nice deal. You can just kind of go along this edge here, and it just puts a nice little line all along the edge of your strap. It's something that they used to do on all straps. They used to always run an edge crease, and they have a couple different designs. Some of them do a bead or a single line. You can kind of do whatever you prefer, but I have this old creaser and I just like the way it looks. So we'll go ahead and do that, and that way it finishes up. But the way you're going to decide how long that, once you have that whole piece kind of creased, you can hang it on your bench, and anytime you need a loop, you can just grab that material and make you a loop. And so this is just kind of a piece that I have left over from making the ones that we made a couple weeks ago. So what I'll do is I'll take this rifle sling or whatever you need to make a loop for. It needs to go around both these pieces, so I'll take those. I've got one side of it that's been cut straight. You want to be sure you're nice and straight. And I'll bring it around and then bring it completely around both pieces of leather there, and then I'll put a mark just a hair away from where this other one ends, and that tells me about how long it needs to be. And so then we'll just take our head knife or regular knife or whatever you got, and we'll just cut that. You just want to be sure and cut it nice and straight so that when you fold this around, they'll meet up nice and square right there. And so now, since both of the slings that we're making are both the same, this is a 1 inch there, and that's what they always need to be for most of your rifle sling mounts on a rifle or anything. They're all the same. So we'll go ahead and just kind of line these up and cut them both the same. So we're going to go ahead and make both of these right now. And so that's not good enough for anything, so now we've got 2 of these. So now what we'll do is I like to go ahead and right there at that crease, or right close to the edge, is I'll make a hole there with my awl, and I'll do the same there. And then on the other end as well. And we'll do the same to this one too. But what we're going to do is just a little X-lace like that. I like to use a nice heavy thread. I've got some natural thread that I really enjoy for applications like this. And this is a tiger thread. It's just in a natural color. So we'll get us a piece of that. And then a harness needle here.
We'll go ahead and thread this. Now you can lace these up any way you want to. You can also use staples. If you like to use staples, they make a really nice brass staple, I think Weaver does, where you can put that in there and then just staple that down. I don't have those, and I prefer to lace it. It's just not going to come loose that way. Now you can do the X lace like this, or you can have the X on the inside of the loop to where you just have the two lines of the stitch. But I think the X looks kind of cool, so I always leave it on the outside. So then we'll just take this, and I always want my tie off or my burn on the inside of the loop. So I'll come out of my loop basically, leave us some to tie off with later. And then I'll come right down here. Come right back out. I'll come across diagonally. Back out that direction. Come across. So as you can see there, I got kind of like a Z looking deal there. And we'll come back out here one more time. Pull it tight as you go. Then we'll come back diagonal across here. And then right back down. Now I like to have two wraps on each end. I only have one up here. I should have gone around one more time, but go around twice on the ends. That's just how I like to do it. I'm not going to back up on that one. But then once you have them both there, then we'll just tie a knot there. And so I just do a normal granny knot, and then go around one more time. And then we'll pull that tight. That'll lock that down without leaving too big of a knot there. And then we'll cut that. Cut them a little bit long so that you have a couple little strands hanging down, and then we'll burn those down. And that'll make a nice little loop. Now if you have loop irons, you can take and put this on a loop iron that's the same size basically as this, and then mist this down and get a little bit wet, and then you can shape it with your hammer and make a square loop. I don't have any loop irons presently, but I'm having some made, and once I get those I will do that. But once I get it on the actual gunsling, I'll kind of tap that with a hammer and kind of square that up so that loop looks somewhat square. But like I said, if you have a set of loop irons, you can really get these things square and make them look really professional. But that's how we're going to make our loops. And so I'm going to go ahead and make this other one. I'll have both loops ready to go. Whenever we die the edges, we're ready to assemble these gunslings. So our edges are dry now, so we'll go ahead and put our dye on there. Just Pro Oil dye is all I use in a dark brown finish. Now I like to go ahead and put another final coat of tan coat, especially on the backside because that chap leather hasn't had any yet. And so after that dye is dried for just a few minutes, then we'll go ahead and put a coat of tan coat on there just to kind of freshen these up and make them look nice and make the finish shine a little bit on both the front and back and along the edges. So now we're ready to assemble these gunslings. And so I'm going to go ahead, we did mark the holes when we cut them out, but sometimes after finishing and stuff they're a little hard to see. So we're going to go ahead and remark our holes where we need to punch. Number 5 holes is the size of the hole that I'm using is a number 5. And we'll go ahead and punch those. Those work well with Chicago screws. And then I'm using just little short Chicago screws. The length of Chicago screw will depend on how thick your gunsling ends up being. I think here I'm using 1/4 inch Chicago screws on here, and then like I said, we're going to put 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom.
So that's making a rifle sling. Like I said, they're pretty much just like making a belt. There's not a whole lot difference about them. So you'll notice in the video that I used 2 Chicago screws at the top, 2 Chicago screws at the bottom. I did that because Chicago screws are bad about jiggling loose, falling out, that sort of thing, and I want to have a backup in place, so I want to be sure and have 2 of them on there so that the gun is securely held by the sling when you're carrying it, because there's nothing worse. You get a gun that's perfectly sighted in and then you bump it, or worse yet, it comes off the sling and it falls and hits something. Then you've got to start all over. Not to mention some of these rifles are very expensive, and so I don't want 1 Chicago screw being the only thing holding this sling on. So you're going to want to, I would recommend using 2. You could probably also modify this to use a buckle if you'd rather see some type of buckle system than Chicago screws. I'm just not a big fan of Chicago screws on a lot of different things, but on these gunslings, if you put 4 of them on each one, I've had really good luck with that and haven't had any issues. The traditional style one is our most popular one that we build. We haven't been building many of these because I just came up with the pattern for this one maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And so we just hadn't made a whole bunch of them. But this one, every year at Christmas time, we'll usually make, 4 or 5 of these. They make great gifts for anybody that's kind of hard to buy for or something like that. But and they're great use of material as well. Like I said, if you can line them with a lot of just regular chap leather, that's what we line these with. They've got a really nice soft feel to them. They're not too bulky. They're nice and secure. They're strong, but they're not so thick. Like I said, I used to make these with 9/10 ounce lined with 3/4, just like our belts. But I just find that they're just a little bit too heavy, and so I've lightened them up over the last couple of years a lot. And so these were made with 5/6 ounce for the body, Herman Oak skirting leather, and then just lined with a nice chap leather. You could definitely line that with a veg tan or anything you want. I will say that I will not take an order for one of these where we put the sheepskin on the inside. I don't like that for a couple of reasons. The first and foremost reason is because I don't like putting sheepskin on here or any kind of padding in here, because it makes the build much harder to me. I just don't enjoy it. And also too, I don't like the sheepskin in particular because it'll catch more debris. So sticker burrs or grass or hay or anything like that will get caught up in that sheepskin. So I just don't think it's a good option. Keep them simple, keep them thin. They don't need any padding. I think they're fine just the way they are, but you can build them however you'd like to build them. Like I said, we do have the pattern pack available for this in printed version only at this moment, and the link for that is down in the description. So if you do want to buy a hard copy, there's 8 different floral tooling patterns, 4 for this one and 4 for the thumb hole sling. I think you can modify with very little trouble. You can modify and cross those over, but there's 8 different tooling patterns in there, and a few of them have spots for like a brand or initials or something like that. So if you're interested in making some of these, definitely grab that. That's a really easy way and quick way. It's got all the measurements on there, but they're not really that hard. You can come up with your own design. You can modify the design that's in the pattern and make some of these for Christmas. This is a great time to kind of make a few of these up, because even just a basket stamp one, we sell these like that all the time. People will buy them just to have them to give to somebody special in their life that knows that they'll put it to good use. But that's the video on making the rifle sling. Many people have been asking me to do this video for a while, so I'm glad we were able to get it done. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you all in the next project video.